Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatiron Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatiron's Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatirons.tuning.com and stay tuned with Flatiron's Tuning. Welcome back, everybody, to the Flatiron Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This is episode number 96. We got Tasso joining us from his top secret location in the woods, and we got a special guest, Mr. Tanner Smith, aka Smedia, is joining us on the podcast today. And I don't know, guys. I mean, it's been really a pretty boring couple of weeks. I mean, nothing's really happened. I mean, I don't even know what we're going to talk about.
I've been playing a lot of Train Simulator, so
Train
hasn't
Simulator.
been that been yeah.
This is the
been pretty
Train
good.
Simulator episode. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
just
don't
like
know.
forward, back.
I mean, that actually kind of sounds fun.
Yeah, it's not bad. I don't know why, but
If nothing else, relax.
out of the blue. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good concussion recovery stuff.
There you go. Well, and of course, there's been so much to talk about. I don't know where we even start. But Tanner, when last you were on, you had not yet started up and driven the 6-cylinder swapped STI, but that has now happened. You
That has.
got some break-in miles. Let's keep it in the positive for the start here. What was that like?
Well, the car, so first getting it started and driving, it was very choppy at first because we didn't really have a full tune built out for it. So we kind of had like a somewhat estimated vacuum tune kind of done so I could drive it up and down the street a little bit. Getting it started, I mean, now looking back on it, now I look at myself, I'm like, dude, you should have just done this, this, or this now that I actually know how to do it. But getting it started and actually driving it has been phenomenal up until like this past week.
Right. Right.
But no, it's been a blast. We went to the dyno last week with it for the actual power stuff on it. The car was doing awesome. There was like a breaking up issue that I recently found out why yesterday while it was on the dyno. We couldn't exactly figure out why it was doing it. Trying to work on a car on a dyno just sucks.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of room to work. Everything's hot. There's
Yep.
tons of people around trying to see, like in the engine bay, also trying to figure out what the problems are. So the short time I did get to drive it, it was phenomenal. It was an absolute blast. It hasn't felt like any other like EJ or Subaru I've driven before.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I've up until what happened recently, I've been loving it.
Well, and so when you pulled it off the dyno, how much power? What did you make at that point?
We stopped at 700 wheel, and I think it was making like 580 torque.
Okay.
But somewhere around that range, because we capped the fuel system, the ID 1300s that were in the car.
Right.
They probably could have done a little bit more, because what I found yesterday when I was going through doing the teardown on it, I found out that cylinder two's injector clip started to depin itself, which was the cause of the breaking up issue. So we probably could have squeezed more out of it if it would have cooperated and if I would have known sooner.
Right.
But like I say, hindsight's 2020, so I mean, you can't change anything now. But yeah, I did 700 on the dyno. We detuned it down to 650 for the street, just so that way I could sort out any of the other issues that we had going on, like the breaking up issue. And we keep having like a weird sync loss issue, which now I know how to resolve that for this X setup that I'm doing. But yeah, we detuned it down to like 650, got one street hit on it, and then that's when it let go.
Right.
So can I get, because I'm not super familiar with your build. Can I get just like a quick summary? I went and checked out one of your videos actually just this morning. And it was pretty good, and I recommend everyone else go. And I mean, they're pretty entertaining videos and stuff to watch, and some good stuff in there. But I didn't catch like a kind of a 30-second to 1 minute kind of summary of what this car is. So it looks like a later STI.
Yeah, so it's a 2017 STI on a Haltech Elite 2500. The car has a built EG33 from a 95 SVX into it. Had a PTE 6870 dual 450 fuel pumps, forward-facing manifold, 4.5 or 5-inch for my intercooler. So I was fully built out to what I could afford at the time. Just to see how.
Is it built as like a fun car, or a cool dyno car, or built for some sort of
all around whatever I kind of want it to be car? It's not really built for any specific reason. Like if I wanted to take it out drag racing, I could do that. If I wanted to take it to the track, change up some of the suspension setup and change a few things here and there, take it to the track. So it's kind of just an all around car for whatever I wanted to do with it.
Cool. And it's worth mentioning that you've been the process of building the car. Is it over 2 years now?
It's been about 2 years as of this month. So yeah, about 2 years as of this month.
So this is, I mean, it's kind of like you're building your dream car, and it's taken 2 years. You finally got it running, got to the point where you could break it in and drive it, and now the process really starts.
Yeah, now I get to
Right.
do it all again.
Yeah,
Which
which is
that's
rough.
the fun part.
Yes, but like ironically, that's where I thought like getting Tasso on would be good, because Tasso, if people have been following us, they just listened to the podcast last time around. You just had, at Alpine Horizon, a little adventure in your car and rolled it timer 3, and so you're now deep in the rebuilding phase as well.
Yeah.
And so so if you're curious what happened with Tasso, maybe go back and listen to the previous episode, or check out OTC Racing on Instagram and whatnot. And unfortunately, the car, your race car, is pretty much, well, no, it's a write-off at this point.
Yeah, chassis is. A lot of the
Yeah.
drivetrain turns out made it through, and so that it's. I mean, I don't know if I would rather be. I was thinking about this. I don't know if I would rather be at the point where I had a car all together after 2 years, and then it wrecked after the first couple, or not wrecked, but it needed work after the first couple miles, or at the very beginning of a build. Especially now, like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where like you get a little spike of like a little bit and you think you know everything, and then whatever. I'm
Yeah.
thoroughly at this point where like I know exactly what I want in the next race car, and
Yeah.
how am I going to make it perfect? And I just need to make it down the rest of this roller coaster to be like, screw it, it's time to get a car together. Because right now where I'm at is almost complete blank slate. Like I know pretty much I want to keep it a Subaru, but now my mind after that point is just analysis paralysis to make it the perfect car. So I don't know if I would rather be stuck at the point where I'm at, where like I have this completely blank slate and all the opinions in the world of what I want to do, or you've got, I mean, still I watched your latest video, and it sounds like there's still a pretty good amount of usable stuff left in there. It's just a matter of
Just an engine.
kind of, yeah. So
Well, yeah, and you've figured out that, I mean, there's so many problems, Tanner, that you've figured out and run into and found solutions for, to get to the point where now, like, just putting another engine in there, like, minimal surprises left.
Yeah, I mean it's the hard part is done, because I already know what I have to do. I already know where everything goes. Everything's already fabricated. Everything's already built out, except for the wire harness, because I'm throwing that one that I have in the garbage and I'm redoing another one. I'm doing a proper harness this time with like Raychem actual wiring harness supplies, because that last one, I didn't know any better on that last one. I cheaped out, got like the Amazon special for wiring supplies. Not a smart idea. So if anyone's watching this and they're going to make a harness, don't do that. Or otherwise you'll run into more problems than it's worth. So yeah, I mean, at this point,
full auto sport connectors.
What?
You can do like full like auto sport connectors, and
I'm trying to stick
for
the most part with OEM Subaru connectors for what uses OEM Subaru stuff, and then Haltech stuff for all the Haltech goodies that are in the car, just redoing those connectors. So for the most part, there's no like crazy connectors I need. I'm debating doing like a mil spec quick disconnect of the firewall this time, just to make life a little easier, so that way I'm not having to shove a harness through the firewall and back through every time I need to take it out of the car.
Yeah,
that would probably be nice. Hopefully you don't have to do that too often, but whenever that should arise.
Yeah, I feel like if I'm going back and I'm going through and redoing all this stuff again, I'd rather just do it the right way. Even if it takes me a couple extra months, I'd rather just let it sit, do everything the right way. Because the biggest cost at this point is just another short block and maybe a cylinder head. So have you gotten the cylinder heads off? So this won't go out for another week, and I think as you recorded that, you had not taken the cylinder heads off. No. So I'm pulling the cylinder heads off today, and I'm taking the engine out today, and I'm sending it back down to out front today also, to find out what is salvageable. I have a feeling everything's going to be reusable except for the crankshaft and anything that was in cylinder 2, because my spark plug is now one with the cylinder head. So I'm pretty sure everything in that cylinder is a little toasty.
Okay, so that's probably the biggest source of damage is in cylinder 2. Okay. Well, so what really struck me as interesting with both of you guys is both of you guys really transitioned fast into, like, this happened, whatever, here's where I'm going forward. Like Tasso, talking to you, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 days after the incident, you were already thinking like, okay, here's the plan. I'm going to start taking everything apart. I'm going to see what I can salvage. I'm talking to everybody about a shell.
Still, that afternoon, like immediately after it happened, I'm sitting there waiting for my wife to show up to drive me home because I couldn't exactly remember how I got there and stuff like that. So I'm sitting there waiting, kind of hanging out with people in my camper, and like already like, okay, I wonder if I could reuse this part and that part. And so the plan was going immediately. So
Yeah. Well,
um,
well, and Tanner, you had posted something up on Instagram. I
Mhm.
think like once you got home, I want to meet maybe even like the next day or the day after of getting back, and immediately like listed out this even crazier plan of like, all right, we're going sleeves. I'm going to go up to 99.5 pistons. So I could just use standard pistons and like not a lot of time had gone by. And I don't know if this is something like as you were doing this and it's taken, you've been in this process long enough that you probably had some time to go like, hey, if I had this to do over again, I would think about doing this or think about doing this. And maybe like all of that just kind of came together, but you transitioned very quickly to thinking about the next step versus dwelling on the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a hard thing for a lot of people out there if they haven't been around cars for a long time or something like that, and you have a failure or you have an accident where you roll something over or something like that, and then you can either sit there and dwell in your sad little puddle of tears, or you can just pony up and figure out what you got to do, keep going on. I mean,
Right.
because the car's not going to fix itself. Nothing's going to change if you just sit there and kind of wallow in your sadness. Like, yeah, it sucks. You can be sad about it, but at least try to like move forward to get the steps going to get whatever you're trying to achieve back in motion again.
Yeah, that is for a lot of us out there. I put myself at this. That is a tough transition to make, but you guys seemed to do it pretty quickly and relatively effortlessly. I'm sure that there's some frustration there, no question. But like, yeah, it was crazy to see both of you guys just like on to the next thing. Let's do this.
it's just habit, I think, too, right? I spend a lot of my time, either bench racing or just daydreaming during the day about building my next car or what I would do different and stuff like that. So it's that now, except for that's the primary objective and not a daydream anymore. So,
Yeah.
like it's
Do you think part of that is like with a race car? So Tom, so your car's a race car. You've competed in it for a number of years, and as you're competing with the race car, you're trying to develop the car. Whatever
yeah.
series you're in, like if you're not like to the level that you want to be in, you're trying to develop the car. So like in some ways, having a crash to this point where the car is not usable, it's like, well, this is the next phase of development. Like, okay, well, because like we were talking the other day, your car, the last car was a GD chassis, and now you're thinking, well, if lightness is my biggest priority, do I go to a GC chassis just because of the lightness? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, what is the next level of that development?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this a couple times, so I don't want to take up, all of Tanner's podcast here. And so, I mean, go back through, watch some episodes. This is almost a dead horse for me at this point, but I'm always trying to get the car lighter and lower, essentially. So, and I had run into some stuff where with the chassis I had, it would have taken, almost a complete strip out, like cut the cage out, go back to bare shell again to do that kind of stuff.
And start over, yeah.
And start over. And so this is almost an excuse. It's a bummer. I'd rather not, if the car hadn't been wrecked, I'd be, racing this weekend to finish out my season of the CHCA and stuff like that and be not perfectly happy because every racer or every builder or whoever always wants to make something better. But, I would have been, just a pig and shit out there just getting after it with my heavy car. Even at 2660, how
Which
heavy
isn't
it
so
was.
heavy, but yeah.
So, right. But so yeah, there's it's an opportunity to do things like super sick this time around, and that's, I mean, part of what Tanner, I want to really talk to you about, like your wiring harness and your decision that what you had last time was junk, and why you thought that, and some of that stuff going forward. 'Cause that's another thing. I've always had wiring issues with my car. I've been chasing home position errors for like 2 years now and replaced
I was doing the
everything.
same.
So
You're both
over
on
it. Like,
Haltex, by the way.
yeah,
Which
it's
is
not a
not that's
Haltech
not
issue.
that's not a Haltech
It's
issue.
yeah, there's something going on wiring in the car. So I, for this time around too, I want to start with some cool new Haltech products I've been learning about from scratch. And like, even with a street legal car, run the entire thing through Haltech products, including like brake lights, turn signals, wipers, engine management, anti-lag switches, all that kind of stuff. Transmission sensor issues, or not issue, but sensor stuff for my car, because I'm not, sequential or anything like that. So it's pretty simple, but run the whole thing through there, and it's that same kind of blank slate thought about, holy shit, I've learned all these things that I've been so frustrated with. Now is the chance. Now is the time to go back and just like scorched earth this thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
So
like when you get that blank slate moment, that's one nice thing about it is you can go back and fix all the, like, it sucks when those moments happen, but you can go back and fix everything that you've been unhappy with and hopefully get it sorted again.
Is that something like Tanner that was a motivator to you? Like once you like just, all right, this sucks, but man, now I can do all of those things you wanted to do. Like,
100%. Like my fuel lines, I'm not happy with they work, but I'm not happy with them. My wire harness, wasn't happy with that one. Turbo selection, wasn't happy with that, so I can fix that. Fuel injector size, wasn't happy. Fuel system, because now I'm going to put a surge tank in the car with the in-tank radium hanger that I have. So there's like all this stuff that has been like in the back of your mind that you're like, God, I really want to fix this stuff, but the car's working right now and I don't want to tear it apart and I don't want to have it sit again. I get tired of pushing that thing around. That thing is heavy.
Yeah.
It's so much easier just to drive it whenever I need to move it versus pushing it. So that was another motivator for me. It's like, I just don't want to keep pushing this thing when I can just get in and move it. So if I tear it down and I got to bring another car in, then I got to move it. Cause I just work out of a 2-car garage like any other normal dude at home for the most part.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's maybe the key, the kernel there between both of you guys is just to focus on those opportunities and the possibilities versus just to dwell on a single event that happened.
Mm-hmm. Like that's one thing that people need to understand when getting into, like, if somebody is coming into cars, motorsports, whatever genre it may be within cars, they have to understand that the failures are going to happen. You can take every preventative measure in the world, but a failure will happen at some point. They're unavoidable.
Yeah. Well, and Tanner, I got to say, when towards the end of your video, when you just like, yep, that's it. I'm putting an EG in this thing and I'm selling it. I'm selling everything. I'm starting a cooking channel. I was like, but wait,
we're doing gas station food reviews.
Yeah,
right.
That was rough. I mean, I didn't think it was going to happen, but you had me for a second. But I'm glad that that's. I could never. Case.
There's something about these money pits that just keeps bringing me back to them.
But what you alluded to there, I mean, that there's a lot of people I've seen go through that. I mean, I've seen. I mean, Tasso, there was a point a few years ago when you were having your engine troubles. Like, didn't you go through like 4 engines in 2 months, or something like that?
Yeah, there was other stuff going on, but it wasn't great. I got tired of that. We've talked about this too. I hate working on cars. It's.
But it was a tough stretch, and I've seen other people go through stretches like that, and they're just like maybe 2 engines, and then they're just, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I think that it's something where, like, there's a saying that a project car is never done, and the reason is because the project car is never ever done. And it's the same thing with a race car. I mean, race car, it's always a work in progress. I mean, you're very few people have a race car that they just like, yep, that's it. And I hop in it and I drive it. And
those are all the LS cars. They just put an LS in it. They'd be done with it and it works.
Even then, not necessarily. But yeah, and I think that that's kind of the dream for a lot of us. Is like, I'm going to build this thing. Like I'm going to put a 6-cylinder engine in my STI and I'm going to put it in there. It's going to work. And then that's it. But it's never that simple. And it's never that clear cut. And I think if you come into any of these things thinking like, I'm building a race car, I'm building my project car, I'm just going to get to this point and then that's going to be done. Like, that's where you kind of can set yourself up for some frustrations unnecessarily.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the context of like, what should I do to my car before taking it out on track, right? And the answer is get in it.
Right.
So like, because it's never going to be ready, right? If you're waiting for your car to be, once I just get brake pads, then I'll be ready to go to the track. It's like, no, then you're going to find the next thing. So just get out there and fry some brakes and blow some motors up.
I would strongly recommend pads and fluid most of the time.
Whatever. And even that, just get out there. It doesn't matter. Boil your shit and figure out what it's like. It's fine. Just do it at a safe place, like on the track, not. Yeah. So, right. And that's, we've talked about that to death, right? Like, you're going to take hits in the race car game or in the tuner game or in the, life game, frankly. But so you're going to take hits. You're never going to be ready. Get out there and do it. Work as hard as you can to get ready. But then remember, the goal with building a race car is not to build a race car; it's to go racing. So, or whatever your dream car is. Like I really want to get this car done as much as anything because I want to drive it again. Because the last car, it had plates, but it was not resembling street legal. Even for a rally car, which already pushed the limits pretty good, right? So like this next one, the plan is to have, a full light package on it and everything like that, and headlights and run plates on it, even being crazy race car stuff. Yeah, I can't wait. Not just the racing thing. Like I want to go take this into Cars and Coffee again, or drive it down the highway kind of thing.
Actually get out and be able to play with it.
Yeah, right. It's
that's the excitement, right? That's the whole reason you do all this madness.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So it's, I don't know, and that's what's been driving me right now to kind of keep moving. Because if you remember, like last year after I blew that transmission up towards the end of the season, because like turns out I can't make a single season of hill climbs completely the whole way through without breaking down. I was so done. That car sat with a broken transmission in the garage for like 5 months before then I scrambled, for the last 2 months to get the car back together.
That is the race car way.
Yeah. So it's, everyone gets pulled down at times. Everyone runs out of morale. Sometimes, I've been doing easy stuff in the whole rebuilding process right now and just stripping the last car and doing a ton of internet research. So,
well, at least have another fun car to drive while this one's down.
Yeah. I honestly have thought about buying another Subaru just as a daily, just to have fun with, because right now I'm down to one functioning vehicle out of the 6
I know
or 7 that I own. Yeah.
I know that.
So, whatever.
Well, it's worth mentioning that like if it's too big of a hit, like giving yourself some space and some time to kind of like just come down from all that frustration and be able to refocus. That can be a very, very worthy time spent, but you can't dwell on it too long.
Yeah. Gotta go, Doug.
So Tanner, and speaking of other cars, I mean, you've got another project. How are you juggling all of your projects now with this rolled into the fold?
So I've got the STI that is pretty much torn down at this point, which I'm pulling the motor out of today, which will take me maybe 20 minutes to do because I made that car stupid easy to work on now. The WRX, which I'm fully anticipating the WRX to blow up. That one is one I'm expecting to blow up, and I foresee it happening soon. Either that 5-speed's going to let go or that stock 255, because we're pushing that stock motor to 450 wheel right now on E85, and it is that one's a time bomb. So at some point, I already have a set of out front closed deck case halves here. I've already got this 6-speed and most of the 6-speed swap stuff here as well. So that one, when that one blows, I'll swap that one. And then I have my Evo that I'm picking up this weekend from my shop. I'm bringing back over here to the house so I can start getting my Evo working again. So trying to juggle them all, it's like, all right, I know this one's going to break. This one's currently broken. This one kind of works right now, so I'm not going to mess with the one that kind of works because I need to get around. So I'll work on this. It's just juggling whatever ones like work or don't work, because it's always a revolving door with these three. Plus, we have the GTI. We have a Mark 7 GTI. That one's been the most reliable car we've ever had. Haven't touched it. Hasn't had any problems. My Golf R that I had for like a month was a totally different story, but that GTI that one's a trooper. That one's a champ.
Yeah.
So it's always just a revolving door of like which ones work, which one needs what. Like you guys said, like a project car, a race car, they're never ending. Like it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you prepare for it or not. There's always something that's going to come up, and it's always just a revolving door. And of course, I always choose all the unreliable cars, as people would call them, as my dailies. But that's what keeps life exciting, right? You never know which one's gonna throw a fit next.
True, but I mean, I think. And there was a long time where my tuner car, my fun car, was my daily as well. Mm-hmm. And that definitely brought a little bit of extra level of stress from time or two, especially having some interesting experiences at the track. So I think like to take some of that stress off too, like having another vehicle that is like Tazo's got a truck that you're not really messing with. That thing is just, you just drive it. And then the toy car is something else.
$2,000 in parts right now. And I've been pushing them, like stretching that truck as far as I can go on not maintaining it.
Right. Well, but having that reliable daily is something that you can just not have like that level of concerns. Like if something happens, something breaks,
Mhm.
it's gonna have a minimal effect on how you get to work the next day or whatnot. Then that helps matters.
Yeah. Yeah, the red car was my daily for a while, and that was stressful. By the time it's caged and, kind of strung out a little bit, and
Yeah.
I had the shitty old Dodge, but that thing, honestly, at that point had literally lost a wheel twice on the highway at that point. So,
That sounds fun.
I
Yeah.
never trusted it for anything. I still have it. If anybody wants to buy a first gen Dodge Cummins, let me know.
Buy 3 wheels, get the 4th one for free.
No, it comes with 5 wheels, so
5
it has a
wheels.
So you get
spare,
an
yeah.
extra.
Yeah,
Spare. Wow.
just in
Okay.
case you lose one.
All of a sudden, this is getting tempting.
Yeah, daily stuff. I don't
Yeah.
know. I want to go, like, I don't know if you had a plan for what to talk about, but I still want to hear more about your kind of wiring harness, like
Oh,
what
yeah,
you're
go
just,
ahead.
because this is
Yeah.
a thing, like, honestly, I've just gone through like the HPA videos and Haltech videos lately a
Those
lot,
the
like going to
HPA
learn stuff.
videos. So I've worked with HPA a couple of the super cool guys, Andre and them super cool dudes over there.
High
I've worked with them
Performance
a couple
Academy.
times. Yeah. And I've gone through all of those wiring videos, and it's very difficult to apply what you see in these videos into reality when it goes through making this stuff, because they make it look so, and it's not easy, but they make it look so easy in these videos where they're like, you just crimp this
Right.
one connector onto this wire and then stick it into the pin, or stick the pin into the connector, and then
Right.
you'll go to do it, and you'll only have two, like whatever Haltech part you buy, you will only get these 2 pins. So if you mess up on these pins, your harness is going to sit there for a week until you get these new pins in. So I've done it so many times where I've gone to put these like pins on wires, and I'll go to crimp it, and then the pin will just break. I'm like, there's another week I got to wait now. So now I've learned to buy like excess of all this stuff. But with like the last round of like harness building that I did, that was the first engine harness I'd ever built. So it was a huge learning experience. So I've got like wires going into the engine bay that are just wrapped up with that like Audi electrical tape stuff, like that cloth, whatever it is. I've got wires going into the back, and nothing, like I thought that I mapped everything out the first time exceptionally well. Not at all. Now I know to go back through, like with my coil packs, because I run all my coil packs on the bottom of my manifold because I have the Haltech 1As, and then I just run plug wires down to spark plugs. There were like grounds that had to come off of there that go to like the cylinder heads that I didn't know. I was like, okay, I just need like a signal ground and a battery ground from the ECU in this. So this time when I go out, is for your car, are you using just like a Subaru plug and play OEM harness, or are you just like building one?
I have been using the plug and play for the Elite stuff, and I don't want to, in all my build planning stuff, I'd like to go Nexus next year. And go, and we'll see. I mean, it's not cheap, but it is extremely powerful as a vehicle control unit or whatever they're calling it nowadays, right? I'd like to go Nexus and go 100% from scratch the entire thing, like mount every component in the car, put the motor in the car, put the Nexus in the car, battery, all the stuff that's gonna, an intercooler spray tank,
and then just get the flying lead harness
and then essentially the plan right now, and I don't know, because I've wired stuff pretty extensively before, but I've never started from scratch with a wiring harness. My plan is to mount everything up, wire everything pretty good, and then take it all out, make it look pretty, and then put a harness back in the car. And so that way I don't run into like those, like, oops, I forgot this thing, or adding stuff
my
later.
issue when I first did it, is I didn't do that, where I was like, I need to get all of these sensors and all of my components put in the car so I know what wires are going where before doing it. Because I just grabbed the harness, shoved it through the firewall, and then I was like, all right, let's just start kind of putting wires where I think they're going to go. And that was one of the big problems I had. And then the second thing that's extremely helpful that I wish I would have known the first time is because you have a Elite 2500, right?
2000.
Okay. Does the 2000 enable you to use the Nexus software? Or are you still on the previous software?
So I've been using Nexus software for a year now, which is pretty cool. But switching to like the Nexus hardware too, then is a complete redo because of the different kind of configuration there.
In the actual Nexus software, whenever you're going in and you go into all your configuration tabs, you know how you can go into like wiring and you can see like what wires designated to where. Map all of that out in the Nexus or in your software before you even like go to build the harness, so that way you already know what wires going where. I wish I would have done that the first time, because that would have made life 1,000 times easier, because it's like I don't know if this DPO wire can work for this one thing I'm trying to use, or I don't know if this AVI input will work for wherever I'm trying to put it. So doing all of that would have made wire mapping and figuring out what goes where so much easier. Because I didn't even know I could do that the first time I went to build this harness. I'm sitting there with this big fold out Haltech wiring diagram. I've got the OEM Subaru FSM wire diagrams all spread out. I'm like, all right, let's start figuring out where stuff goes. And it was like 3 weeks of going through all these wiring diagrams when I could have just gone into the software and been like, this wire just goes there.
Okay.
It made life 1,000 times easier.
Yeah, I mean, my plan at this point has, like, before putting wires in the car, figuring out where everything kind of mounts in the car, and then literally like printing out a poster size printout of the layout of a Subaru, and then drawing it in to make sure I have every component. And then in the middle, where the hopefully, fingers crossed, Nexus would be mounted, put like a full, like, at least 8.5 by 11 sheet of every output from that Nexus, and then assign from there, and then essentially trace it, and do it all on paper, like that, because it's in it. So for anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, the Nexus stuff from Haltech works as like your ECU and stuff, but like not the software, the hardware, the actual Nexus, R5 unit or whatever they call it, but also a PDM. So it, counts as like where you have fuse boxes in your car and relays and all that kind of stuff. It's all done solid state in this control unit. You just run a battery lead to the Nexus, and then the negative back to the battery, and then you can run everything off that thing. And from what I understand, everything like headlights, taillights, wipers, engine,
blinkers, everything,
fuel pump, everything, right? So get a little CAN keypad, and just do that. So it's it becomes an extremely, like, it can simplify things in that you have one central place where everything just feeds from, but also it can become really complicated because you have one central place where everything feeds from, right?
And so you have to rewire everything.
And so what I'm talking about, there's not going to be a wire in this car in my plan in my head until everything's mounted. And I mean everything, like, even the seats for the intercom wiring, because that has to deal with where the intercom wire comes in on the harness and stuff like that. So everything's mounted, and then wires go in the car afterwards. And it's all, because the factory spends so much time placing its wiring harnesses to either be easy to manufacture, easy to assemble, out of the way when you slam your skis through the back seat in your pass-through back seat, then they don't cut something inadvertently beneath a carpet or something, whatever, right? But so starting from scratch race car stuff, or lightness, simplicity, reliability are kind of the driving factors there, right? Then I can run this, mount that Nexus on the center console or on the tunnel in between the seats, and then just spider out from there to go to everything, kind of thing. That's
also, so both of you guys, I think, Cassandra, did you build the harness or did you use a plug and play?
I built it.
You had to build it. Okay.
Yeah, there was no plug and play options.
So the lure of the plug and play is that it makes it sound simpler, because hey, all this wiring is still in the car. I'm just going to unplug the ECU and then plug a standalone into all of this stock wiring, and then just maybe add a couple sensors. Would you say, I mean, that's the dream. Would you say that, kind of like Taza, what you're talking about, that it's maybe not that much simpler, and in some ways pulling everything out and starting from scratch, if you're building, like doing a build to that level and need to really go with a full standalone, would it in some ways it seems like it'd be easier to start from zero that way?
Not easier to a point. It becomes a lot more capable to stay, or a lot easier to, I don't know how I'm going to word this. If there's a point where the plug and play is amazing. If I had even like a hot daily right now, plug and play, slap the ECU in the factory location, slap a CAN wideband controller on there or something like that. That's awesome. Holy shit, that's sick. Like it's so powerful and easy and good, and that is the dream, like you're talking about, right? But it's when you start either doing really unusual applications like that EG33, or you start really stressing stuff and asking more and more things to do things that they weren't originally designed to do. That's when it becomes easier at a point you cross a threshold to just start from scratch and then do it right. And especially when you start talking about, because I knew I had 10 pounds of wires in my dash I wasn't using, that I just didn't feel like taking that harness apart because I hate working on cars.
Right.
So like you're right, when you're chasing every last pound, or when you're chasing really unique applications, like throwing 2 more coil packs and 2 more injector leads up to the front end than your car was designed to do, then suddenly going custom becomes really the only way to do it. Because for a long time I made it right, but then take complexity, but also just the wear and tear of motorsports on stuff, right? You start chasing, signal errors all the way through your whole life. And it got to the point I had connectors, like the 2 on like the GD generation on the driver's side, there's those 2 big plugs kind of by like the original Wasser reservoir and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I had taken those things out and cleaned them and this and that, and they got covered in oil, and like the seals swelled up in there from all the oil, so I had to pull the seals out, and I couldn't get new seals back in there because everything was all. And so it just, I was chasing my tail on band-aiding things with the factory harness for.
Well,
it was bad.
What about troubleshooting from a troubleshooting standpoint? Because like if you're piggybacking things onto factory wiring and all that, I mean that's, I don't know, Tanner, do you think that's kind of one of the things that troubleshooting was troublesome?
So with like a custom harness like that, when it comes to troubleshooting, the only time that it becomes easier is if it's a physical failure or physical problem with one of the wires, because it's really easy to just go into the software and be like, okay, I'm having a problem with this sensor. It's these 2 wires. I can trace it back to the ECM if I need to. It's super easy to depin. I could just swap around a couple wires if I needed to test something to make sure it wasn't like a mechanical failure. But when it comes to the actual like software side of wiring issues or things like that, I wouldn't say it's any easier. I'd say it's a little bit more annoying, because like with my setup, like with you, we were getting the cam and the crank sync errors or home errors. It would lose sync at some point in the RPM band whenever the car would be running. And then it's like, okay, it's not giving me any information aside from it's just losing sync. So when it comes to the wiring side, it's like, do I need to add a resistor to the wiring? Is there something I'm missing? So like you were saying, whenever it comes to like the plug and play stuff, like if there's a plug and play option, I would take that any day of the week for doing like simplistic off the shelf type of, I don't want to say off the shelf type of builds, but like off the shelf options for a build you're doing. Like if you have a S14 and you're putting in a 2JZ and Haltech offers a plug and play harness, buy it. Buy it. Just make your life easier and buy it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and I guess that's the other thing with the standalone, like you said, like once you move outside of the Subaru environment, like now the troubleshooting, you don't have all of these guides in a service manual to guide you. You kind of have to
don't get me wrong, the Haltech support from Australia is fantastic. They will remote into your computer. They will help you walk through, like Scott over there at Haltech helped me last time when I was trying to go through some of these issues. Fantastic people, and their customer service in Australia, let me specify, the Australian office only, I've only had good customer experience with, has been phenomenal. They'll remote in, they'll help walk you through things, they'll make changes to your map if they see something blatantly wrong with it. So if you're troubleshooting and it's outside of the bounds of what you understand and what you know, you do have that support from Haltech, and you know that they'll be able to help work through a lot of the problems with you. So that's one nice, at least with Haltech. I don't know about like AEM or some of these other standalones because I've never used them before, but at least with Haltech, it's really nice to have that customer support to be able to help troubleshoot through some of that stuff.
Sure.
And they're very powerful computers. I mean, if you think about the difference in computing technology when, for my car, that whatever they are, 1-bit ECU
16-bit, but basically one. Yeah.
Right. So like when that thing was invented back when they're, still using like Apollo moon mission technology versus now.
It's a little bit better than that.
Yeah, like when you were a kid or whatever that was. Or to modern days, like like what your iPhone is capable of. Like they say that iPhone is more capable than the computers that were on the shit that landed on the moon and stuff like that.
No, beyond.
Like
beyond
it's because I've done like some of the troubleshooting stuff in the Haltech software where you just open up the pinouts and just start looking at voltages. Like, what the hell is going on here? Oh, okay. And then you can kind of trace through, and the user interface along with the kind of more powerful computer is one of the more valuable things I think to the Haltechs. Where I mean, even just go to switching a map, right? Like you don't have to like try and find little plugs, or your friend has a little short section of wire to put the ECU in flash mode, and because you don't want to buy the cob plug that does it and stuff like that. And just stuff like that is so much easier. So right, there's like you're saying, an aspect of it being more complicated because you opened up this whole world, right? And you're now in free roam mode of engine management and stuff like that. But also you have more powerful tools to help you in that world too, which I think kind of, I don't know, I'm a logic brained person, so like it takes me a second to like orient my brain to the situation, but once I can convince it to focus, then I can start, piecing these things together or parsing them apart, and kind of doing that stuff, which I think is a cool thing about all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
well, and all the extra functionality that a standalone can bring in.
And pops and bangs.
Some of the built-in tools in there are nice too. I don't know if you've used it, but like the oscilloscope function, having that built into a standalone and being able to see the oscilloscope of like a sensor you're trying to see if you're trying to diagnose an issue, that makes life so much easier. Instead of trying to use like all these other tools you're trying to like plug in like an SSM computer or something, it's all already like right there for you.
And the knock sensor tuning too, right? Where it's no longer just like more sensitive, less sensitive, but like you can pull up like I don't know what the name, like each frequency that it's sensing at any point, and then you can force it. You can try and force it to knock, and then try and find where in the range that, and then you can tune it, because mechanical noise is always a problem with knock sensing, right? So you can tune it like, oh, actual spark knock is happening in this range. Ignore all this other mechanical noise from my loose ass heat shields and my zip tied wiring harness and stuff like that, right? And so like and then what do you want it to do with that information once you get it? It's not just more and less sensitive. It's listen to this range, and when you hear something there for at this amount, what do you want it to do? And so it's, I don't know, not to just sit here and stroke Haltech or any of these kind of things, but if you haven't lived a standalone life, like you need to consider the standalone life, because it's, it's just so much better.
Well, and Tanner, you kind of alluded to the fact that like there were some signs that something was maybe more wrong than it seemed initially, and that now knowing what you know, if you would have known that back then, you would have taken a different path.
Oh, 100%. Hindsight's 2020, and if I would have known, because when we first got on the dyno, everything was going fine with the car, and I made the call to turn engine protection mode off on the Haltech to be able to keep tuning, which is a little bit of a dangerous move, but
was that what was hindering like getting performance out of it?
That was part of the trigger issues we were having between the home and the crank, as it kept putting the engine into engine protection mode and it wouldn't let us continue tuning. And we knew that we had sync. We knew sync was fine. So we were like, all right, maybe it's just something going on in the wiring harness. I'll tear the wiring harness back apart when we get home. So I told Josh, I was like, hey, just turn off engine protection mode for now. I know that everything is synced up totally fine with what we were doing. And for the first, because we were on the dyno for I think 12, 14 hours that day, which is a testament to that car for being able to be on a dyno that long and take, because we probably did like 40 to 50 polls back to back to back to back all day long. So the fact that a problem didn't happen sooner, I'm kind of impressed with. And the problem didn't happen until after we got off the dyno. But like if you watch the tuning video, because I made the call to turn engine protection mode off, which was a risky move, you could see in the dyno video the car breaking up, and you can see like the white like fuel that's not getting burned getting shot out of the exhaust, and that was the misfire that we're trying to chase down. So we're like, all right, maybe it's spark plug gap, maybe it's one of the spark plug wires, maybe it's a coil pack, because the last thing I'm going to think of is it's cylinder 2's injector clip slowly starting to depin itself from engine vibration, and it was only one of the injector pins that was slowly coming out. So I think it was the signal wire and it wasn't the actual power source to that injector.
Okay.
So as the day continued on, that's why we weren't getting any like check engine lights, any cells or anything like that. We would still get the cells, but it would still let us tune past it. So that's one dangerous side of standalones is you
Well,
have the power to bypass all this stuff if you want to.
Right. Well, and I mean, to a certain extent, even if you're tuning with factory ECU, you can do that. I mean, again, like if there's this fail safe that you're turning off, I mean,
Yeah,
you're kind of
flirting with
your own.
danger.
Right. But I mean, that's a good lesson too. I mean, I'm guessing now at this point, like if you run into that kind of an issue again, that would be enough of a flag to say, all right, we're done for the day. Yep. I've got to run this down.
Yeah,
figure out what the issue is before I go forward.
And it's gonna sound like a terrible reason to do it, but the other part of it is like I've been building the car so long. I was excited to finally get it on the dyno. I was excited to finally see it start making power. I wanted to drive it. Plus, I've got the entire internet down my throat. Like, get this car on the dyno. We want to see what it's doing. That one I is back at like lowest tier. Like I really don't care what other people think when it comes to that stuff, but it's like I was finally excited. I was like, I finally have my car back after 2 years. It's working. It may not be 100% and maybe in this 90% threshold. And then I keep telling myself this. I was like, if I would have just put it back on the trailer after the dyno, it would have never broke, because it was that one street hit right afterwards, because I didn't lift on the car. I did second through fourth full watt just because I was so excited, and that's what finally did in cylinder 2. So looking back at it now, I know you can't let the excitement get to you, even if you want it to, because if it does, sometimes you just get to deal with the consequences. And like I said earlier, everything, that's my view on like cars and mechanical things, is everything is fixable if it breaks. Like there's always going to be a replacement part. There's always going to be a spare engine somewhere. There's always going to be machine work that can fix or surface out whatever problem you're going against. So just don't let the excitement get too much of you with a car that's been sitting for a long time and you finally get to drive it.
That is important
it's a real
lesson,
thing though.
But that is a hard lesson to learn. That is really difficult.
Been there.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I can't tell you how many times when we were trying to suss out a problem on the race car, we tell the driver, like, all right, just go out, take it easy. Don't go wide up the throttle. We just like do like 2 laps and then come back, because we just need to like just down back. Let's just see what's happening. And then like 30 minutes later, car's fine, car's a mess. Like who knows? Because like just the red mist comes in there, the excitement comes in there. You're on track, you're at speed.
So you lose like that judgment. Like when I was in the car after like we got off the dyno, because we were getting ready to push it back on the trailer because the home and crank or the sync issue started happening again when the car was hot. So it wouldn't even let us turn the car on. So we pushed it off the dyno. We were about to push it on the trailer. And that's when we tried to start it and it fired right up. I'm like, I'm driving this thing right now. And that's, you get in like this mindset of like your logic and reason just disappears. And it's just like pure excitement.
Yep.
That's dangerous.
That happens, man. That's a thing. Yeah.
It was worth it though. I'm going to say that now. That one pull to destroy that engine was totally worth it.
Yep. I was going to ask that.
It was so worth it.
Because I mean that was like the culmination of all this work, is you got to actually drive the car and experience the power, feel what that was like, all of this work, all of this ingenuity, engineering that you've done to get this to that point. Like,
and it's dangerous too, because now that I know how it felt when driving it, and I know what went into it, and the response I got from the car, I'm like, I don't care if it blows up 100 more times. I'm gonna keep doing this. It was so different from any other car I've driven. And it could have just been like all the time I put into it and whatnot, and it finally like coming together. But like the sheer feel of the car, the acceleration from that thing was wild. It was absolutely wild. I've never been through it. Yeah, and it only made like 650 at the time. And my old 05 STI made the same power, but the power band and how the car felt nothing like this one. It was weird.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, 2 extra cylinders and like all the extra differences there. Yeah.
Well, there's something about like the rawness too of a car that you build or something like that, because I've been in fast cars, they're OEM fast cars and stuff like that, right? And it's not the same when it's engineered and perfected.
You got all the sound deadening everywhere.
Yeah, right. It's not the same as like, it's just something about like that I don't know, the rawness, the primalness of, you know, tuner horsepower versus manufacturer horsepowers.
Yeah, especially with like loud, solid mounts. My exhaust coming out of the fender, E85 fumes smacking me in the face. So doing one pull.
Yep.
It sounds entirely dangerous, but
yeah, it's good stuff.
How much of it too now? Maybe is like what fuels the motivation to like get back in there, pull the engine out, find the next solution, is the fact that it worked.
Yeah.
It didn't work as long as you wanted it to work. You got to drive all the break-in miles.
Mm-hmm.
You got on that, you finally got an idea of like, all right, with this turbo, these injectors, everything, this is probably the power that's going to make. And then you got to experience it, and you got to feel finally the reward of all of that time and energy spent. Like, and just like what you're saying, like you got one try at it, but it was totally different. It was you're seeing like these concepts, like why didn't you just build a 4-cylinder? Why did you go to the 6-cylinder? Because I'm trying to do something different. I'm trying to make the power in a different way, and it worked.
I get a lot is not like all the time, but I get people say, why are you trying to reinvent the wheel? Why are you trying to do something like this? Like X, Y, and Z for an EJ formula works. And it's not that I'm trying to like be the fastest Subaru out there. I'm not trying to take records. I'm not trying to like push anybody off their areas or whatnot. It's like I just want to build the car that I want to build. I don't see why it's so like I get salty people for some reason. I'm like, I don't understand why you're like, I just stay in my lane and do my own thing. I don't understand why you're getting salty about something. I'm not trying to like take your record or something.
Right.
Just trying to have fun doing what I want to do.
Yeah, I got the same thing. I got pushback right now because with the next car, I want not a full WRC replica, but WRC body kit on it, and kind of have the look, right? And so people are like, why? It's not going to be a WRC car. Like, what, you don't think you can fit enough tire underneath a standard body? It's going to be so much easier. It's like,
why does it matter? It's not your car.
Yeah, because I love it. Is that not
what I want to do?
Yeah, screw you. Make your own car, man.
Yeah. And it's always the ones that like try to like poke and prod that like haven't tried to do it before.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
yeah. And at the end of the day, none of us are doing this for a living, right? I mean, I don't know if your channel.
I mean, I do YouTube
part of your business,
but I do like all cars, and it's not just like my one Subaru that I'm trying to.
Right, but it's not like any of us is Mercedes Formula One team or something like that, right? Like it's so there's absolutely an aspect of because it's sick. That's why I'm doing it. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, and it's cool to. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it's to have an idea that is not that goes against the grain. There's not the commonly held thought out there, and to find a way to make it work. And then now, like you got enough of a confirmation that like you're on the right path. Like whatever your plan was, you're on the right path, and you're moving in the right direction to get that goal or to achieve that goal.
Yeah. And with all the trials and tribulations will come failures, and you take the failures, you learn from them, and you apply them to the next, and you just keep going.
Well, and the other thing is, like, if nobody ever is going to try something different or think about something in a different way, or like sometimes there's like a very commonly held like thought that like this is the way to do it. Well, try something else. Like maybe that's not the only way to. Maybe it doesn't have to be a circle to be a wheel.
This is true.
I think it does. I think it does have to be a circle. So maybe don't try that. But like sometimes you have to actually go out there and test some of these commonly held beliefs to see like, does this really actually?
The internet's proven you can make a wheel out of anything, but an EG33 shaped wheel does sound pretty badass. So
for sure.
I mean, that's
rolling quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's just something about 6 cylinders. If you've got that 6-cylinder,
it's got that Porsche vibe.
Yeah.
It sounds like a V8. It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that I've never, I mean, it all kind of, if you think about it from a rally standpoint, the 4-cylinder boxer engine and where they put the turbo, it all makes sense. I mean, the turbo is a key part of the engine. You don't want it to be in a vulnerable location. You don't want to have minimal, like light impacts potentially have a major impact on the function of the car. So you want to protect it. So like you put the turbo up there. But when Subaru did that, it's
like I totally inhaled my coffee.
Well, you're fine.
All right.
But when Subaru did that, I mean, they kind of set this thing in motion where like things are not going to be as optimal in a lot of ways because they picked the layout that they did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we've kind of been working against that for a long time. And
Subaru even worked against it themselves with the WRC cars, right? Like they changed the location of that turbo a lot.
Then they broke them down to 2 liters also, or like 2.2s.
No, there were always 2 liters. All the WRC cars were 2 liters.
Yeah, there's a displacement limit for the class at that time for stuff.
but it's like, so thinking like Subaru has a 6-cylinder engine. They have turbos. They could have done this. They even like for the FA cars, and actually starting in 2010 with the Legacy, they realized, well, maybe putting the engine in the trunk or the turbo in the trunk is not the best place to put it. Maybe we could actually put it closer to the cylinder heads and gain some benefits for it.
Mhm.
And they started seeing some benefits for that. And then with the FA20 cars and like the new FA24s, like there's a lot of benefits there to having that turbo being so much closer.
Yeah.
So there, I mean, that's just one example that even Subaru went down that path of like, okay, maybe there's another place we could put this turbo and actually change the way that this engine works, get some benefits for doing it.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with doing, because I tell people this all the time. I respond to comments with people asking questions like, there's nothing wrong with doing and I hate to call it a cookie cutter build, but like the cookie cutter Subaru build, where you either stock location, you either go rotated. If you're doing this, you do that. There's already a pre-designated path that you follow down when it comes to making power or doing X, Y, or Z with these cars, where because they've been around for what, 20 years at this point, a little over 20 years. So like you already know what you're gonna do. It's been around, the R&D's already been done, the trials and tribulations have already been gone through. So it's like this out there stuff where you're kind of trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work versus 20, 25 years of things that the accumulation of the community has already done.
Yeah.
So it's like a couple people trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work for some of these things.
Yeah, but that's the best. I think it's the best place to start because you've got the best foundation to build upon.
Oh yeah.
So like I want to make 500 horsepower. I'm going to do it with an EJ25. Like you have like probably 4 or 5 very well tested and vetted options that you can go down. But then for some people, it's like, well, you get there, you do it, but then you're like, there's this aspect or this aspect that's just not quite what I want. Like Tasso's car is twin scroll, and I think Tasso, like you really like the way that the twin scroll turbo works on that car.
Yeah, for my application especially.
For your application.
It's also different too. Everyone, like if I had $1 for every time someone said, "What exhaust do you got on that thing? It sounds crazy."
It's just a pipe. That's the answer.
Okay, yeah, but after the turbo, but that doesn't have as much to do with how the car sounds as the stuff before the turbo. So, especially for those Subarus.
Well, the point being is like for some applications, twin scroll works better. Like we tried it 6 ways from Sunday and never got it to work the way we wanted it to, and so we had to go back to the single scroll, and then that's when everything started to work for us.
Yeah.
So.
Because that's what I ran on the 6 was twin scrolls, the twin scroll 6870, and I think that was one of the things that attributed it probably sounding a little funky as it did, but the responsiveness from that twin scroll was nice, especially on that 6. So a twin scroll is what I believe the turbo I'm looking at is twin scroll. I know it's T4 housing. I don't remember if it's twin scroll or single scroll because I'm going from a 6870 up to a 7685. So I believe it's still twin scroll. I'd like to keep it twin scroll because that's how my manifold and everything's already built out, which would make life better. But the twin scroll stuff's fun.
Yeah, well, you got the extra displacement, so that you don't have to keep things tiny and worry about the response quite as much.
Push all the power up into the very top of the RPM band like you would an EJ.
Yeah. Well, and like for Tasso's application, it's that top end. The benefits you get at the top end with the twin scroll is what works well for his car because since he's doing hill climbs, he doesn't have to run a restrictor, and you can spend all that time up top there, and so that's where it's a real benefit.
What turbo do you have on there?
Turbodynamics LM450 SR60, so roughly GT30 sized. It's a stock location twin entry, not true twin scroll. But because of the kind of the efficiency of the exhaust up to that point, that S in the SR60 means the turbine housing is sized more for the 2 liters, even though I'm on, like a bored out 2.5. I still don't lose. It doesn't choke off the top end as much as like a single scroll or whatever would. Having a smaller turbo, it lights nicely. It has a much more linear boost curve than you picture, especially like large turbine housing.
Yeah.
If you picture, I don't know which way this looks for you guys, if it's left to right or right to left, but you have like that, like rip, and then for your boost pressure kind of thing, if you looked at like a boost graph, with the twin scrolls, it's a much more like it's there, and then it kind of goes, okay, cool, we're good. So like it builds boost nicely. It holds to, I spent a lot of time on the rev limiter for style points, and it's not completely just choked out at that point, which I think is one of the benefits of because people talk about, including me when I started looking into it, people talk about twin scrolls like, oh, they're so much more responsive, or oh, there's so much more of this. I mean, all the same turbo sizing considerations still apply. It's just the twin scrolls or the efficiency of the exhaust just gives you an ability to kind of stretch that effective range for that turbo based on the displacement and airflows and stuff like that. So it's I'm able to take a smaller turbo for the response and then stretch its effectiveness up through the RPM range essentially, which is what the goal was and what I think the benefit is for my application too.
Yeah, because what you're doing, you're always up in the very top of the RPM band for the most part.
Yeah, and so I don't know, it's sort of tuned that way a little bit too. We haven't spent any, like, we don't do like off idle characteristics.
Yeah,
like the car sucks off of 700 RPM because we never spent literally no time tuning that. Right. So we just moved the idle up to like 1800. And then you don't have to worry about how it runs below 1000 RPM because it's never going to be there. And so, and then, who cares what the ignition table is doing at 2000 RPM? You're only there starting from a stop kind of thing, right? So it's, it's not bad, but I notice it because especially it's a low compression motor too. So like when it's having to run, NA style, cruising around the pits or getting on the trailer and stuff like that, it kind of sucks. I kind of have to treat it like a two-stroke or something like that, like rev it up and like dump the clutch to get it onto the trailer kind of thing. And but whatever, it's not what its job is. So
it gets the job done for what it's doing.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds good at 7,000 or 7,500. So
it's like you've taken something that is kind of like could be very simple or off the shelf, but you pick the parts for a reason, and then you've manipulated them for a reason, and now you've gone outside. Like the other one, the crazier one, Tasso or Tanner, the Tasso is doing is he's now running a bypass valve. So he took the bypass valve off, just has a plate on it, and that's it. It's like there's no ability to release pressure from the intercooler. Don't do this at home, kids. Do not do this at home.
It just goes out the turbo. It's fine.
I did that on my old Skyline. Made fun of it.
It's good.
But there's some benefits to it. I mean, it's a little bit harder on the turbo, but if you can make it work, like all of a sudden you can have throttle response with a turbocharged car, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and it sounds really good, which is a big consideration too. And people say I can't do it, and I did it. So there you go.
That's always been a huge debate on the internet too. No blow off valve, no bypass valve. You're just blocking it off. You're going to damage your turbo. Your turbo's going to blow up. It's been
it ran all season the competition. I'm curious now because I'll go through the motor while the car's apart. I want to put, because right now I have a short block that literally it uses a pint of oil probably every 6 minutes of runtime. It just moves it into the catch cans.
Impressive.
So yeah, that's probably why it hasn't blown up driving it the way I do. And it's all built out of spare parts. We should say I'm not a cookie cutter recipe for horsepower guy, because I just did a lot of internet research and then found a bunch of used parts, and then stuck them all together with chewing gum and good friends and a lot of help from. It's exactly. Like, I don't know. It's a sloppy motor. I run really heavy oil and a really big oil pump and run a lot of RPM to keep it all happy and
for a short period of time. Like it's designed and built around a specific application. This is not something that you like driving.
Can't drive this car to Cars and Coffee. I'd have to stop for oil breaks on the way to Cars and Coffee in this car kind of thing, even if it had headlights and shit.
Right.
I forget where we're going. So I'm not a cookie cutter approach to horsepower kind of guy.
Well, but it's going outside that prescribed path. Like sometimes you find stuff.
The turbo and stuff too, right? Yeah. So it was a. Oh yeah, that's right. Because I wanted to pull the turbo off and see how it held up to the no blow off valve life and stuff like that.
Worth sending out to having it come through. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll pull it out and wiggle the shaft and See,
if it's good, slap it back in.
See how loose she is. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's and then build a short block this off season with much more like in the ballpark numbers, like piston to wall clearances, in the thousands, not hundreds and stuff like that. And, I mean, it's not actually that bad, but it's pretty bad, the motor, because it was no shit spare parts.
Yeah.
So for like a built motor, or whatever you'd build for this, what type of engine would you do? Like semi-open, closed deck?
So I've been running the semi-open stuff, like just factory case halves.
Factory 257 case. Yeah.
Right, yeah, or I don't know if it was a 255 or 257 case. It's the same case, so it doesn't matter. So I've been running the EJ25 case, more or less off the shelf. The last one was bored just because when I got the case halves from someone else's blown up motor, it already had 100 mil pistons in it, so I just stuck with them and rehoned it. Which is why my piston to wall was like 6 thou or whatever it was. It's too much because normally you'd target 2 to 4 or something like that.
Well, and it's worth saying because this is the engine, like you had that stretch that I mentioned earlier where you went through like 4 engines in a really short amount of time, and so this is where like you're kind of the bank account is a little bit on fumes and you're cobbling together a way to get the engine together.
So that stretch of a bunch of motors at once was from a bunch of trying to do it cheap and easy, to just slap a new whatever reman short block in from whoever, mom and pop's reman shop kind of thing. And then I decided to do it cheap and hard, which is what this motor was, where I bought a bunch of used case, like literally is $100, and I got just emptied out a guy's garage of case halves and parts, and found like a good crank in this block and a good pistons in this block over here. And so
made one engine out of all of them.
And as much like we got it balanced, so performance porting helps me out with a lot of engine machining and stuff like that. So we got the whole thing dynamically balanced all the way through the clutch and everything. And it's got a handful of forged parts, but like we didn't even have to gap the rings. They were already at the maximum allowable from JE ring gap, just because the walls were so loose.
It saves you some time from having to grind them all.
Exactly. Yeah. It's an easy build in that aspect. But so it's used parts, shitty clearances, pretty low compression. I think we actually ended up in the high 8s, just from fortunately we had enough piston in there and stuff like that. I'm on a D25 head at the moment, but not running AVCS stuff. So it's the 255 cylinder head. So not the B25, which is like the STI head. This is like the turbo.
So you're like 11 to 14 WX single AVCS with AVCS deleted on the intake.
Yep.
Correct. Yeah,
because
running
it's in like an 04 with at the time it was running just a 2-liter ECU, and now the hell's
right. So I may looking forward, like what am I going to do this off season? I'll probably leave the heads alone. I'll probably run wires for the AVCS, and just leave them plugged in to keep the plugs clean, kind of thing. But I'm actually the crank or the cam sensors are there still, just acting as plugs in the heads. But then I have like the 205 style, front cam sensor on there. So I'd probably wire that stuff, maybe not quite run it right away. I don't know. I have a set of cams that they're cheap. They're Brian Crower 272s or something like that, non-AVCS cams. Yeah. Because the BC 272 is kind of like Kelford's a much more common in the motorsports end of things. Their specs for their rally cam, like a 260, a mid 2, I think it's 264 or something like that cam, actually really similar to the Brian Crower 272. When you get away from like advertised stuff and actually look at like duration at lift and stuff like that, they're pretty similar. Like Kelford's a little better in terms of like lift and true duration, but the BC fudges their numbers enough to make the advertised duration sound super hot and stuff. But anyways, it's all kind of there and kind of junked together. Next motor though, I think a little bit more compression and then like usable amounts of blow by instead of like
not ridiculous.
Instead of having to empty the catch cans every 5 minutes, I want to be able to drive the thing, like I said, to cars and cars. Like I have this goal, it'd be sick to drive it to an event, win overall at a hill climb, and then drive it home kind of thing. But not have to run like a like a transfer tank of oil in the car and just constantly be pumping oil into it, kind of thing.
Yeah. That's a good goal.
It's a good, I mean, yeah. So, right. Yeah, I mentioned what kind of deck. I'd probably close deck it. So, performance boarding, I mentioned, they'll close the decks on a block.
It's becoming more common out there.
Yeah, so he comes from, Dustin comes from like a, Honda side of things and stuff like that. And those guys they call it hard blocking, I think. Those guys have been hard blocking cases since before Subarus were a twinkle in someone's eye.
I'd have to say that, like, it's got to be some Honda guy that went to a Subaru and then looked at an EJ case and like, why aren't you guys putting a closed in this?
Yeah.
Like we do this in B series all the time. Like this is not a big deal.
You can't spin this thing to 10,000. Do you guys even own balancers? What?
Right. Yep. Well, you know what? Yeah. As we're coming up over an hour, and Tanner, first, thank you again for your time. Thanks for coming on the podcast again. But the thought that just occurred to me is like, so you had asked, why are you doing something so different? Why are you trying to go outside the box? And like thinking about it here, like talking about some of these decisions that you guys have both made, the thing that dawns on me is if you go outside the box, it's going to push you. You're going to have to try things. But in doing that, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about what works. You learn probably even more about what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you have that experience and you gain that knowledge, now you can apply it in way different ways than if you would have just followed this tested and proven path, where like it's going to kind of allow you to avoid all these problems, but then you don't learn nearly as much.
Yeah, this STI and this swap has taught me so much about building. It is like I've learned how to wire, I've learned how to weld both steel and aluminum for fabricating, I've learned how to plumb up things, I've figured out how to integrate CAN systems and take OEM sensors and make them speak through a CAN system to a standalone and all this other stuff that I never would have known if I would have just been like, all right, we're going to do another EJ, we're just going to do a rotated setup, plug everything in, get it tuned, and it's the same as all the other ones I've done. So it's the amount of stuff that I've learned off of this, and then going forward into this next revision set that I'm doing with the car, which hopefully should just be a winter rebuild, and I should have it back out by spring again with the entire new setup. I'm going to be redoing like charge pipes, everything. I want to make it all just like that much better, because like you were saying, you take what you learn as you're going through things and you keep applying it and you keep growing and you keep doing it, you're going to be able to push those boundaries so much farther, versus if you just stay in your comfort zone, you just keep doing the same thing over and over again and over again.
I mean, so Tasso, it's obvious that all the lessons you've learned from building your car to this point is now you're going to use all of that to build the next car. So Tanner, you have your plan for the STI, but is what you've learned and all the information you've gained from the STI, does it inform now what you're doing with your current WRX project and the Evo project? Does that allow you to look at those projects in a completely different way, or?
Oh, 100%. Because like with the WRX, with that one coming up, like you and I have discussed, like the 6-speed swap that's going to be going on in that car, there's going to be the wiring from the DC-CD controller. If you would have asked me a year ago to put that module in, I would have looked at that DC-CD controller and like, it only has like 20 wires. It's not a lot of wires, but I would have looked at those 20 wires. I would have been like, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing with any of this. Now, like I go into, like I pulled up their instructions on how to wire it. I'm like, oh, this is easy. This won't take more than like 2 hours. I can build it out into a harness and pin everything in, especially with the Evo. The Evo is a real bad one when it comes to like the electrical side of things. And like some of the other stuff is that car has sat since 2017. It's an 04 Evo 8. Hasn't ran since 2017. It was somebody's drag car. It blew up. I built the motor. It's got a built trans now. It's all put back together. But like the wiring in that poor car, I have never seen anything so just destroyed, torn apart, cut up. And it's like, all right, now I got to go back in here and apply all the stuff I've learned from the STI of like how to use a multimeter properly, how to check like resistance, how to check continuity, figure out where a break in a wire is or something like that. It's like you work on one project
before you even started.
Dude, that's my life is wiring at this point.
Yeah.
Which I don't hate it as much as I used to. I used to be terrified of like electrical and wiring, but after you start to do it for a little while, it's not as bad. It's a little methodical and it's a little bit annoying, but it's really not as bad as people are like super scared of wiring, and I totally get it. I totally understand why. Like you're looking at an ECU pinout for like connector B26 or something like that on a 17 STI, and you're looking at it, there's like 50 wires going into this one connector, and you're like, I just need this one wire, whatever one it is. And then you sit here, you look at it. I get the scary aspect, but once you understand how to read like the diagrams and go through them all, it's really not as like scary or bad as it seems. Plus everything's color coded too, which makes life a little easier.
And once you do it, just like the experience, getting into it, having some successes, even starting from a small point and then building up to like wiring a whole car, for crying out loud. I mean, all of a sudden now you have a lot more experience to draw on.
Yeah, even the failures. Like if you remember last time, I think I talked about this, is with the STI, I knew zero about wiring when I started this car. I had the big brain idea to go into that car and start cutting out all of the OEM wire harnesses. Because I was like, I don't need all these wires.
Yeah.
I'm not using this. I cut out like stupid things for some like CAN system stuff.
Right.
SRS stuff, all this stuff. I was like, oh, the car will be fine. It doesn't need that anymore. And then I go to start figuring stuff out later. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have cut any of that.
Right.
It's like as you go through, and that's the big thing I tell people is like the mechanical stuff, the wire harness stuff. It's always replaceable if you make these mistakes, but it's like you're not going to learn unless A, you go out there and you try it, or B, you have somebody trying to help you like guide through it. Like that is the best way to learn and apply that information, that knowledge that you get, is just go out there and try. Like worst case scenario, you might have to buy a replacement part. There's used parts online. Like I buy so many parts off like 541 Motorsports online for used WRX and STI stuff from crashed and parted out cars. Like it's way cheaper than buying like some stuff brand new, which I get some stuff you do have to buy brand new. But like all of my wire harnesses that I bought to replace all the ones in that car I cut, I bought secondhand off of the eBay and 541 Motorsports. And I think I got the entire harness set for that entire car for maybe $400.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. So it's like, just go out there and just like try and practice.
And it's that learning. Like if you really want to grow your understanding, you've got to kind of forge your own path a little bit and be willing to get into the weeds a little bit, because that's where the real learning comes from, and that's where the better understanding of how something works comes from too.
Yeah, and I mean, you brought up a good point earlier with like your daily as your project car kind of situation. Like I've been there before where it's Sunday night. I'm doing some install I have absolutely no idea how to do. I have to go to work the next day. So it's like I get that struggle aspect. If it's your only car and it's your project car, I wouldn't say tear it completely apart.
Yeah.
But you'll figure it out.
Yeah, you'll especially Sunday nights when you got to go to work the next day is the most motivating thing you'll ever have to
figure out exactly what you need to actually drive that car to work and what you can get away with not doing on time.
Right.
So, do I need the rest of this exhaust? No, the downpipe's enough. It's got the O2 sensor in it. Let's go.
I can make it to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's a really good point to like towards the end here to end on, because it's like not everybody wants that level of understanding. Not everybody. There's a lot of people now, like towards the beginning, there's a lot of a DIY Subaru community. Like a lot of the Subaru people that were playing with their cars really wanted to get in there and do it all themselves, and they wanted to be completely hands-on, have turned every nut and bolt on their car and know everything in and out, and to try these things out and explore it. And then like that's kind of gone away to a certain extent, but if that's really what you want to have, is a really good understanding of your car and of how things work, and to understand this, then I mean sometimes you've got to go off the path and try some stuff.
I think you probably have a different perspective on that. Because being at a parts house, and especially a lot of the folks getting parts from a parts house have the later cars, and I think you end up with a different perspective on that, because like from the amateur motorsports crowd, I mean maybe actually the preference would still be there. Like we would all love to arrive and drive for the most part, but it's just not the reality, right? Like we have to figure out how to work on our cars. So it's almost 100% DIY kind of in my experience with these cars still, and with the the import racing community or whatever you call our community. So I don't know. I wonder if you have a different perspective on that, just from where you are in the industry versus where I am.
I guess where that comes from. I mean, we get, because of all the information we've put out there and all the questions that I've done my best to answer in a public forum. Then, I mean, we get a lot of people that are calling up and asking those questions, but then it's also like talking about builds with people. It's just they're just wanting to know what, like, they're working with a shop, they want to know what parts to get, and they just want to hand everything over to the shop. I'm not saying that it's gone it's not 50-50, but it's
And I think
closer to 50-50 than I think it used to be.
I think financing in the aftermarket has really changed that too. Like all
That's
your
true.
Affirm fine, like the ability that you can go and instead of, you know, having to shell out cash for a stage 69 short block that'll take exactly 750 horsepower and no more,
Right.
or whatever, right? I think the fact that people can go and finance that on their, you know, whatever their, you know, hourly wage is, like opens up a lot more of those conversations like you're having.
Well,
And
I think, I don't know. I mean, I think when the STIs got dual ABCS, like 2008, there was a lot of things going on in 2008, 2009 that changed things. But cars, like from that point forward, like the STI got more complicated at that point, and then it's continued to get more complicated. Like you look at the FA20s and the BRZs, those engines, those are way more complicated engines than the EJ series. I mean, they're not. It's not impossible to work on them, but it's not. It's not the same.
I mean, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily more like I've worked on a lot of EJs, FA20s. I turboed my old BRZ, went through all that stuff. I wouldn't necessarily say they're any more difficult to work on than like GDs or GRs or anything like that. Like the only major difference is like the dual AVCS stuff when you're looking at like SDIs, which is 4 extra electrical connectors for the cam and the AVCS. But for the most part, like I'd say it's all fairly similar still for like tear down building and whatnot. Yeah, and can, but for the most part, most people aren't touching the can systems. Right. They shouldn't be.
Because you can't.
Yeah, they shouldn't be for what they're doing. But like I get both sides of it where like if I had the money and I could afford it, by all means, I'd pay someone to do half the stuff that I do because I just don't want to do it. But I'm just cheap when it comes to that stuff, and I'd rather save my money and use that money for something else rather than paying whoever at what shop. Plus, like there's also that trust factor with a lot of shops out there where are they going to do the job right? Are they upcharging you? Are they even using the parts that you're supplying them? Or like all these X, Y, and Z factors that go into it where there's this huge trust thing with a lot of shops out there and trying to find like a trustworthy shop that can actually like work with you well.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And we've had those calls too. Yeah, that's a difficult path once you figure out that you're on it to get out of. Yeah. Well, I mean, so maybe I'm overstating, but it seems like there's both camps. There's both camps in Subaru. And
there's not a right one or wrong one. Either one is totally fine.
And I think there's a lot of advantages to getting in there, getting involved, getting dirty, trying to do stuff and learning your own on your own. It's like this is why driving lessons are so great if you really want to learn how to be fast behind the wheel. Is once you improve your skills as a driver, that applies to every car that you get behind the wheel of.
Yeah.
To some extent, and like once you make your way through like a certain number of problems and installs, all of a sudden now like you can apply that to any car that you work on. Like it's
because problems that you would face early on that you would think is like a massive deal. Like I remember when I was first working on Subarus, I had a turbo inlet. It was my first STI. It was an 08 STI. I sold my 350Z for this car, and coming from like a VQ to an EJ, I'm like, I have absolutely no knowledge on this thing. And my turbo inlet died on that thing and I had a massive vacuum leak. And I remember sitting there the first time I was doing this, and it like doing a turbo inlet now, it's not a massive deal. It's an hour and a half job for me. Pop the intake manifold off, old one out, new one in. But back then I didn't know any better. So it's like, as you get this experience and this knowledge, everything becomes easier for you too. Because I remember sitting there, we cut up the stock turbo inlet and ripped it out of like under the intake manifold any way we could. And then I'm sitting there with a Perrin 2.4 inch inlet, and we didn't have any, like I didn't know a lot about cars at the time, so don't overly judge me for this. We didn't have any like WD-40 or anything like that. So we went in the kitchen, we got butter, and we rubbed butter on the turbo inlet to try to grease it to get it like down through here. And it's like, you go through and you it smelled really nice once it like started up after that.
I bet it did.
But it's like these small issues that just look massive as you first start things just become meaningless, and like they're not even problems as you continue to go on. And then you really start getting into bigger issues later on where if you were like that past self of yourself, you'd look at these, you'd be like, throw the car away.
Yeah.
Just throw it away.
Yeah. It's that process of like, I can't take off the intake manifold because I don't know what happens if I do that. So we have to find a way to get this thing under the intake manifold. All right, what do you got? And somehow where there's a will, there's a way. You got it in there.
Yeah.
But like you go through them, like you learn, like, hey, there's better ways to approach this. There's easier ways to approach this. There's faster ways to approach this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and like it's probably like the third most common question I get out at events is like, how do I get into this? Where'd you learn how to work on stuff? And then how did you like get the confidence to undertake like whatever this project was, right? So like I'm at the point now where this next car, like it's completely within my thought process, like, oh, I could build this. I'll just have to move that strut tower up about an inch and 10 mil for further out. And it's like, holy shit. It occurs to me sometimes I'm thinking about I gotta like moving a strut tower, or like when I bought the Subaru the first time, when I got into this whole thing back in, I don't know what it was, 2014 or something like that. When I bought it, it was the first electronically fuel injected car I'd ever owned. And I was like, oh man, I don't know if I should get an EFI car, you know, those computers, man. Like, and now it's like, oh fuck yeah, Haltech, everything, like it's all sick now. And it's, you know, like the first time I did injectors on the car, I was like, all right, got to get all my stuff out and read these instructions like 7 different times.
Yeah.
Like, and now it's just like, well, fuck it, just slap that in there. Like, I'll just like impact gun those bolts off, and then next thing I know, I'm like, it's, you know, pull the motor to work on the clutch because it's easier to have everything out, you know, sitting in front of you versus, you know, I don't know, it's all those kind of things. Like, it comes from doing it. It just being scared constantly when you're working on stuff. And the next thing you know, the things that scare you are pretty impressive things, like moving strut towers and not switching exhaust, or you know, putting a set of coilovers on or something like that. Like that just becomes the thing you do in between working on the actual hard stuff. And then eventually the hard stuff isn't hard stuff anymore. And that's the next thing, right? Like,
this is never ending. It's never ending cycle of continuing to just move down this.
So just do it. Just like getting out and racing, and like same thing working on your car. Just figure it out. Doesn't matter. Like you got a friend that can help you get to work on Monday if you really, really need it. Right.
Plus,
and if you don't,
that's one nice thing about the Subaru community is there's so many people that are willing to help.
So many.
So much stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, there's always the few here and there that are just out there to choke and prod at people, but for the most part, everyone out there is so helpful.
There's a huge DIY community out there that you're going to be able to tap into in any number of possible ways, be it Facebook message boards, Discord groups, you know, reaching out to media, reaching out to us. Yeah, you can find answers, you can find help, you can get pointed in the right direction pretty easily, which is nice. Yeah. Well, I think that's as motivating and a good a place to end as possible. And if that hasn't encouraged you to think outside the box and get your tools ready and go out there and try something, I don't know what will.
Yeah, go break something on your car whenever this comes out and you're listening to it, like on your way to work or whatever. I don't know, when you do podcasts. Go home and just take something apart on your car and break it by accident, and then make it better when you put it back together.
Maybe, but okay.
Not definitely, yeah.
Well,
it's
and
fine.
The other thing, I'll just in on this that I never even thought of. Like back when I was starting this and driving to the track and things got hairy, Uber wasn't a thing. Now Uber's a thing. Like all of a sudden, getting to work is not that big of a deal. You can Uber. Like so get out there, take chances.
Yeah, it's worth investing in free tows.
There's still public transportation too. There's always ways.
There's a bicycle.
You'll figure it out. It's fine. Just do it.
Well, thanks so much, Tanner, for your time. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Good luck with the future builds. We'll bring it back on here as the process comes through. And I can't wait to hear once you've actually been able to live with the car at, 600-700 horsepower and beyond for a period of time, and how awesome that's going to be. So we'll have to get you back on and find out. And all these other projects, all the other crazy things you're doing.
I want to know what that goalpost is going to move to next once you're like, yeah, it's not very much power. If I just put another turbo on here.
We're shooting for 4 digits now because 700 wasn't enough. So
yeah, exactly.
It always moves.
Hey, with those extra 2 cylinders, it's almost cheating. It should be easy.
Yeah, it comes with its own fair share of problems.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It always does. It always does. Customer power always is it's a slippery slope. Yeah. Well, thanks for everybody for listening. Thanks for your support as always. And until next time, stay tuned to Flatirons Tuning. Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Flatiron Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Once again, we'd like to let you know that your support is what makes this show possible. Be sure to check out our online store at FlatironStuning.com for any of your aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts needs. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.